Well, this is going to be our last Bible study of this crazy year,
Yep.
Which is wild and crazy. And then we'll have one more Sunday study. So for those of you that are in town and you want to come by for, our Sunday coffee and donuts and get together, we'll have that again this coming Sunday, and then we'll have a couple weeks off for Christmas and New Year's, and then we'll be back at it. Still on Zoom, at least on Thursday nights, and then we'll see about Sunday. So anyway, if you see this guy here in the middle, this is Jim, Pastor Jim Wicks from up in Portland, and he's a old friend. He's down visiting for a little bit. So anyway, if you don't know him, that's Jim, and he's going to be hanging out with Scott and with me tonight. And Scott is back because he was up in Portland, so he's back and off quarantine and for our Bible study. For ending up, I think, Mark, are we doing Matthew chapter 9?
Nope.
No, okay.
Nope.
So I don't know what we're doing.
You don't know what we're doing.
It's
Exactly.
a surprise to me. And we're going to kind of go back to our regular conversational format.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone's hearing us okay. So we'll kind of be talking with one another and trying not to stare at the screen the whole time. So I'll just say a prayer and then we'll get rolling and whatever Scott has in store. So it's a surprise to me, obviously. So it's not scripted. I don't know what he's going to do. So, it's not staged, it's not scripted. We're just trying to do something like real life here. And then we'll rock and roll. So, all right, join me in a prayer. So, Lord, help us tonight to hear what we need to hear, be hearers and then doers of the word, and to take this really to heart, especially in the season and this world around us, that these may have an effect upon our lives and ripple out to other people, that we may communicate who Jesus is to a world that needs to get to know him. So help us tonight, help Scott speak. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, well, this is going to be a strange format because, first of all, we're going to be talking this is Christmas. And so next week is Christmas. So we're going to be back over the Nativity, the story of Jesus and his birth. So if you got your Bible, turn back to Matthew chapter, basically 1 and 2.
Okay.
Go on back over that. We covered this way, months and months ago, when we first started the Bible study, but, you can never read a passage of scripture too many times without seeing things. Plus, the other thing, I asked Jim to join us because he and I were kind of, it started yesterday, we were kind of free-flowing about talking about the beginning of Matthew and and all the things and it was great. We sing with Jack and I, we love to play off of this, imagine this, or what about this, and what does this mean? And he has some things I'd never seen, and I don't think I had anything he hadn't seen, but anyway, but it was really good. So this is going to be more of since we're all familiar with that story. I mean, everyone knows the story, kinda.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for this story to, as we have this Bible study tonight, to bolster your view of your traditional Christmas, this is probably going to blow it out of the water. As Rich as Jack's dad, Rich used to say, the Christmas story is not for children, but we've turned it into a children's story. This is a pretty dangerous, brutal story, and we'll get into that.
Scott, you can turn your chair a little bit more.
Okay, so I'm trying to get there, but okay, I'm just going to talk to you guys.
They can
Yeah.
do fine.
All right. So, for example, if I was to say to people, well, I'll do this. If I was to say to people, quick, who's in the manger seat? Who's in the manger seat? What's the typical Christmas postcard? And people would say, and you may agree with this, that, well, there's a manger, and there's cattle, and there's sheep. You loud? Okay. There's cattle, there's sheep. There's a kind of a trough where Jesus is laid down.
Yeah.
Mary is next to him. Joseph's kind of standing off to the side. There's a halo over Jesus.
It's like the postcard.
The postcard, there's a halo over Jesus. You've got the wise men at the door with their gifts. The wise men are inside with their gifts, and the shepherds are usually in the doorway, that kind of thing. And that's usually it's kind of like everybody get into the picture, that kind of thing. But that is in fact not that is not true. That's not what the scriptures teach. And so I'm just saying is I want to kind of loosen you up to go, oh, what is really saying there? So, but the first thing we have to ask, well, first we have to read it. That would help. So, Jack, you're a good reader. Would you read, if you got Matthew chapter 1, starting at verse 18, the birth of Jesus, and just read just the end, 18 through the end of chapter 1.
Okay. Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child of the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. But as he considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but he knew her not until she had borne a son, and he called his name Jesus. Okay, so we first have to ask the question is, why does Matthew include this story in the account of Jesus' life? And first of all, how does he even know this story? How does Matthew even know this story? Well, it would have been told to Matthew and the disciples at some time when Mary and Joseph were with, or Mary was with them during the ministry, because Matthew and the disciples were around Jesus and Mary was with them, or they may have heard it from Joseph during their lifetime, but probably this account, this birth of Jesus, was probably told to the disciples probably after the resurrection. Because if this account, this is my surmising, because if this account had been told to them right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, then this would be the same kind of thing. Remember when Jesus is going around and he heals people and he says, "Don't tell anyone," or the demons speak and he says, "Shut up." In other words, he doesn't want it getting out who he really is until he has a chance to put definition to it. He even uses the term, he calls himself Son of Man, which is kind of an empty term. It means Son of God or God, maybe from the Old Testament. He's filling out, he's letting people know who he is and what he's about. Because remember, they are expecting, right? They're expecting a military, political leader who's going to take the country and put, and regain the kingdom of David, so to speak. And so Jesus is not boasting about this story.
Right. Yeah. And this story probably wouldn't even be told, because again, if he tells us, if Mary and Joseph or Jesus tells the story to the disciples early on, then they're going to go, Mary was conceived by God. Joseph was in the father. You know what I mean? Can you imagine how that would run? Well, he is God. He is the political leader and all this kind of stuff. So I'm suspecting that this story was told probably after Mary probably told the story, because actually Jesus didn't know the story. Mary had to tell Jesus the story because he was a baby when it happened. So, and so Matthew is including this story in probably 55, 60 when he writes,
about 20 years after his birth.
Right, 20 years after the death of Jesus. So now he's revealing, he's telling the story, obviously, to us as Christians. And so we have to ask ourselves, so why does Jesus want this story added? I mean, Matthew knows that this should be told. This is nothing that he was told. Now, Jesus probably never said to him, don't tell anyone, right. Of course not. And so Matthew is adding this story. Particularly, and I'm just going to stay with 18 through the end of the chapter, Yeah. So the question is, well, why would Matthew tell this story?
Right, and as you said before, two keys to understand the scripture is to ask questions and to use your imagination.
Exactly.
And so that's what we in one sense have to. He doesn't answer why he includes it, but of course there's a reason.
Yeah, there'd be reason. And remember, this is a silly thing, but it's always important, is that the paper, the papyrus that these people are writing on is really expensive. So whenever people are writing things in the first century, you don't go down rabbit trails and, well, I was just wondering about, I mean, every piece of paper is so expensive. You are writing things for a reason, for a purpose, and everything fits in because you've only got limited funds to write these
That's
things.
good.
So go ahead.
Also, Matthew was written specifically for the Jews
Right.
to prove the prophecy had come
Yes.
true.
That's one of the reasons, exactly.
And so one of the reasons that he becomes meticulous in all of these things is to demonstrate that the law had been fulfilled, the prophecy had been proven true. And so even the account of Jesus's birth matched up with the prophecy that had already been foretold about Mary, about the happenstance surrounding his humble beginnings. And so I think the Jews already had an idea. They had created their own idea, but they had an idea of who this king was supposed to be and where he was to come from. So however Matthew found out, it lined up perfectly with what was already known to be true.
Yeah.
So who his audience is also informs why he includes the story. Not just like it's cool or amazing, but his audience informs, and that helps us to imagine into the why of the story.
Right. And the other thing too is, now, Matt, look, we know angels appear, full-grown beings that kind of, I guess, look like people or something.
Scary.
Whatever. They're fully mature thing. And so I imagine God can enter in human history anytime he wants to, because this is the story of God entering our history, becoming one of us. We are the visited planet. We're not visited, we are moved in with. God has moved in with us, become one of us. And so it's interesting when Jim mentioned that's the thing I came off of was the humility that Jesus could have entered our human history full grown. He could have entered in power and in majesty in Jerusalem, in the temple, announcing God is here. I can heal. I mean, can imagine.
And the emperor, he could be the emperor.
He could be how that's what you would, if you expected the Messiah, the one who's going to save us, that's who's going to show up, and yet here comes this story of a baby. I mean, you've got a husband, a young peasant couple raised, or their town is Nazareth, which is a know-nothing, small little hamlet about 20 miles east of Capernaum, and then they come down to Bethlehem, which is 6 miles below Jerusalem. That's just a little know-nothing town, although it is noted to be where King David was born, but still it's a know-nothing place. These are humble, poor peasants there. Mary and Joseph are nobodies. And God enters our history as a vulnerable baby. No one would see that coming,
You might have Jack read the first 7 verses of Isaiah 54.
There you go.
Because this is another convincing fact to the Jews of all that you're just saying.
Okay.
Want to read it?
Go, absolutely. By the way, this study, for all you folks, this is free flowing. You're in this as well, because I'm not going to be, this is a give and take, and I may never get a word in edgewise in some ways, and that's just fine. So we're going to be just playing with this stuff. Go ahead.
So this is Isaiah 54, you said 1 through 7?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. Sing, O barren one, who did not bear, break forth into singing and cry aloud. For the children of the desolate one will be more than the children of her that is married, says the Lord. Enlarge the place of your tent, and let the curtains of your habitation be stretched out. Hold not back, lengthen your cords, and strengthen your stakes, for you will be spread abroad to the right and to the left, and your descendants will possess the nations, and will people the desolate cities. Fear not, for you will not be ashamed. Be not confounded, for you will not be put to shame, for you will forget the shame of your youth, and the reproach of your widowhood you will remember no more. For your Maker is your husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. The God of the whole earth he is called. For the Lord has called you like a wife forsaken and grieved in spirit, like a wife of youth when she is cast off, says your God. For a brief moment I forsook you, but with great compassion I will gather you.
So in this version, it says, sing, O childless woman, you have never given birth. Break into loud and joyful song, which Mary does in Mary's song. O Jerusalem, you have never been in labor. But the desolate woman now has more children than the woman who lives with her husband. And that's the world. And then it says from the right and the left, but in the scripture it says Jesus reminds the people that people will be from the east and the west, or the right and the left, that he will collect. So anyway, this is all the prophecy that had been foretold. So
and the people were expecting,
And they knew that.
and the people were expecting a savior, exactly, a kingly,
Just not this kind.
not this time, not a baby, a vulnerable baby born to two peasants who have to agree to this. Remember, Joseph isn't going to agree to this; he has to be convinced into it. So God is really putting his entry in a very tenuous, vulnerable way, and that sets the stage, I think, for how God is becoming one of us, and how he takes the lowly, he doesn't show up in Jerusalem as the son of the high priest's wife or something. It's just a nobody. He's a nobody, and that's how he enters our history. I love the movie Nativity. There's that. So I talk about that scene where the word gets out that the Messiah has been born, and they look for him, and soldiers are looking for this kingly guy in a robe and this woman, powerful, and Joseph and Mary walk right by him with this little baby, and the guy goes, "Oh, it's not them."
That's not what people were looking for.
Yeah, that's not what people are looking for. Yeah. So anyway, so it starts off right there. The other thing too is this is God's story. This is his plan. This whole thing, from now we move on to chapter 2, and I just want to pointing out, like Jim had said, that God is running the show here. He's not responding to some clever, we got to figure this, we figured this out, and so God's got to kind of act as we're figuring things out. This is all God. It's very similar, actually very similar to at the very beginning of the church, how you almost feel like things are scripted. It's almost like God does this and God does this and then he does this. It's almost like you feel like you're being puppets in some ways, because God is so hands-on and so directing, and that's what's going on here too. So let's move on to chapter. Unless there's something else you want to say, chapter 1, Jeff. Anyone else? Anything on chapter 1? Okay.
So you're going to read chapter 2. How far do you want me to go?
Just read it through 12.
Okay. All right. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will govern my people Israel." Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship." When they had heard the king, they went their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way.
Finish off down through 19. It's all part of the same story.
Okay. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there till I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, was in a furious rage, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time which he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they were no more. Oh, all right.
Yeah. So again, this story starts right off with who are the players? Well, when Jesus is born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. So who's Herod the king? All right. Herod is on the throne. Really, it's the Jews' fault why this happened. And just a quick little bit of history. About, I'm going to say 178 years earlier, the Jews had been conquered by Syria, and they were really brutal. And finally, there was a family called the Maccabees, and they threw off or got their freedom. They got their freedom from the Syrians. And so what they immediately did is they did what had been happening to them for their whole history. They immediately regained their land and started attacking the neighboring countries, and they attacked the country next to them called Idumea, and they forced them to become Jews. I mean, it's just like, are you kidding? You know, instead of just being content with being free, they started attacking neighbors. They forced the Idumeans to adopt Judaism. And so there was one family, I forgot the name of the family, an Idumean chieftain, okay? And the Jews put on the throne. They put it in power because he's going along with it. And then Herod is his grandson, who finally the Jews, through civil war, they get weakened, and finally Rome is coming towards them. Finally one group to attack because they see they've been weakened by civil war. And so one of the three factions of the Jews goes out and kind of makes peace with Rome and says, hey, put us in power, you know. And so in 68 years, they had 68 years of freedom, and now it's over. They're back under foreign domination. And this time the Romans go, like Jim said, who's the best person to put in power? Someone from Idumea. He's probably half bred, a Jew, but he's not really a Jew by
right. Not full Jew.
Yeah, he's not by design. It's his culture. It's been imposed upon him. He wants power. He's clever. He's crafty. He knows the territory. What else did you say about that?
Well,
He's corrupt.
yeah, people might remember the name Edom or Edomite. That's what Herod was, or you're pronouncing it.
Well, it's a Doom. That's a newer name.
So
he comes from
just
the
so
Edomites.
people might trigger a response. But I mean, yeah, all that stuff that you're saying is right about Herod.
Yeah, and so he
has a brutal family.
Yeah, and so he's put on the throne. You know, had this not happened, the Jews may have had one of their own high priests. But so anyway, so Herod's on the throne. He's going to keep that. Okay, so when Herod's king, which is not a good thing, the Jews hated Herod because he was a foreigner. He's put in there as high priest. He's a foreigner. You know what's going on here?
It keeps the balance of power.
Yeah, and balance of power, keeps himself ingratiated with the Romans through. I mean, he's very clever.
Yeah, he sold out to the enemy.
Yeah, he played both sides. I mean, he was actually very good at what he did. All right, so then it says, behold, and remember in the Bible, every time we see the word behold, it means this is something really important. Look at this. Pay attention to this. Behold, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. Okay. And Jim and I had a great time with this one. All right. So who are these wise men? Well, the word wise men isn't really there. The word is Magi or Magoi, which means, or Magi or Majoi. And
or Magi.
Or Magi.
That's where we get Magi.
We get the word Magi, exactly. But it really means, it could mean they're coming from the east, which is probably from Parthia, the Parthian Empire, from good chance from the capital of Babylon. We know from centuries before when Babylon itself was in power. Remember the exile, they took thousands of Jews into captivity. And so when the Jews were freed centuries later to come back to the homeland, a lot of Jews stayed in Babylon. I mean, that's our home. We've been there for centuries. This is where we live.
We're just staying.
Yeah, so there's a huge Jewish population there.
But they also had a huge influence in prophecy. Those people bought right into prophecy because their history was like sorcery.
Yeah.
And so they were really fascinated by prophecy.
Yeah. And so it may not necessarily be that they were astronomers. A lot of people think, well, they were astronomers and they studied the stars. There's a whole thing on that. However, what is this star? That's the thing we were keying off of. And I'm just going to propose, this is what I'm proposing, and I think Jim would agree with me. You won't, what's that line? You won't stay out of heaven if you don't agree with us or whatever.
Yeah.
But these wise men, these men are in the east, about 700 miles away. And after right at Jesus's birth, this light appears in the sky. And it's a light hanging low. It's something that they see that is a fulfillment of a prophecy that tells them that the Messiah of Judea is born.
Right.
And so, and it's in Numbers. I actually wrote it down.
24.
Do you have it? Okay. So if you've got you look at your Bibles, Numbers, way back in it doesn't matter. Jim will read it.
Well, it's just Numbers 24. You can read the whole thing.
And there's other places too. They talk about there's a sign, a star. Go ahead.
Jack can read.
Where do you want me to read here?
Well, it's really the whole chapter. It's probably too long, but
Yeah.
people can read it about the prophecy of Balaam.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the whole thing. They see that there's a star. Numbers 24:17. A star shall come forth out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel.
Yeah.
So a star. So they're seeing this light, and however they come out, they decide. Let's think of it this way: what would cause Gentiles?
Don't back up anymore. We're going to lose you out of the camera, by the way.
All right, my chair keeps moving.
Yeah.
What would cause Gentiles from 700 miles away to see a light in the sky, which is probably, again, not a distant star, but a low-hanging light, something, because a light hanging in the sky is a star. I mean, you don't have other words for that. That's a star, certainly a lot lower than the other ones, but anyway. And it's anyway. So they determined that light is the sign that the Messiah has been born. We're thinking these guys had to have either been possibly Jews themselves, but either proselytes or God-fearers, men who had actually become Jews, or people who worshiped the God of Israel. Because these guys see this, and whatever they see prompts them.
Right.
Think about this, and they had to be wealthy men or have a lot of money to arrange a entourage, a caravan, a what do you want to call it, a company of people to travel 700 miles, one way, 700 miles to go to to Jerusalem. They think it's in Jerusalem. The king, if a king is born, he's going to be born in Jerusalem. I mean, that's their thinking, duh, okay? So what would prompt that? I mean, if the three of us would get up in the morning, or I go, Jack, Jim, check this out, and we see this light in the sky, and we go, that must be the Messiah is born in Jerusalem. And we go, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I'll see you. I'm going back to bed.
Yeah.
Or that's incredible. But you're going to pack up and leave home for months and months and months and spend tons of money for supplies for, the horses, the camels, the small army of protectors, because they're leaving from Parthian is an enemy of Rome.
It's not a part of the Roman Empire.
It's not a part of the Roman Empire. It's Parthia. Parthia just kicked, pardon my sentence, but the Parthia had just in 54 BC had a big battle with Rome, and Parthians kicked the crap out of the Romans. So this is not a good,
Well, they're obviously doing it expectantly, because they're not like thinking this might happen. I mean, they bring the gifts expectantly.
They're
convinced. On the
yes.
journey, they are convinced that it's going to happen. It's not like
It's happened. No, it has happened.
Yeah. And so they are responding to something, and obviously going with, in one sense, faith that this really is a real thing, right? That this is no fluke or something.
Yeah.
They're going to bring gifts they're going to give to this king.
And they're going they're passing through different territories, different nation states, going into a hotbed. It'd be like us looking at that star and saying, "Oh my God, the Messiah has been born in Somalia. Let's go." Anyone here going to go to Somalia to see? I don't think so. Well, Jim, they're going to a very dangerous.
A place you don't know that's not friendly, that's a foreign
It
territory.
could be very dangerous. It's a hotbed. Something could happen at any time.
And it was considered the end of the earth, the end of the world. That was the known world, which also fits in to later conversations and prophecies. So
The light, they see the light is in the east.
the dark.
And the Parthian, or the Parthian Empire, or Babylon, was considered the ends of the earth. It was the east. Remember, we just read in chapter, later, when we just got done a few weeks ago with Bible study. Remember, Jesus is amazed at the centurion.
Yeah.
And he says, "You're not going to eat at the table, but God is going to bring the people from the east and from the west."
Right.
And it's like, here you go.
The West was Rome.
Yeah, the West was Rome. Yeah. So, but now let me just stop for a second. Think about this. The birth of Jesus happens. Okay. We got two places where something pops up. We got this light, the star, this light in the east, 700 miles away. And then you have the visitation of the same night, probably, in the shepherds. Now, the shepherds, they're right there in Bethlehem. They're tending the flocks. This is in Luke. I think it's in chapter 2 or something like that. You can read it. You probably know the story. The shepherds are out guarding the flock by night, and then an angel appears. I think it's Gabriel.
Singing, no, the angel's singing.
There's an angel appears and says to them, "This has been born to you, the King, the Messiah." You can read it, and then a host of angels appear, and that famous line of "peace on earth and goodwill to man whom God is well pleased," or something like that. Yeah, and so they go to the manger. They're the ones of the night of the birth who go to the manger. The Magi are still months and months away from getting there, because they've got to, so it's interesting. Same thing, maybe, but it appears to be, because they see the star, and the guys in the east see the star, and they're concluding that the Messiah has been born, and we're packing up and going, and they're going to go and worship him. It's just an odd thing that they would see. Like I said, they had to be proselytes or God-fearers. This had to be their Messiah. I'm sorry, I'm not going to spend all my money and take a year to go see your king. Something like that. They had to own that in some way. It's an incredible way to risk and do all this stuff. And that may be part of the behold. Behold, these sorcerers from the east, from Babylon, come all this way.
It's a lot of faith.
Yeah, and then the other thing, which is interesting, is when Matthew is telling this story, and I didn't know this until recently, that about 10 years after Jesus dies, okay, because when we read the story here, the Magi, they come, they give the gifts, they go home, they disappear from history. They go home, nothing. Interesting, in about 40 AD, okay, the queen of this country called, oh my God, I'm going to blow it, Adapenia, or whatever it is, it's just west of Parthia. She's the queen, and her son, they become Jews. Out of nowhere, they convert to Judaism. And they send grain. Jerusalem is having a famine, and they send grain to Jerusalem, which saves them from the famine. They also end up sending gold and stuff that really help Jerusalem out, so much so that their bones, when they die, are sent and buried in Jerusalem.
So there's some Jewish.
Yeah, and so these wise men going back, some influence they must have had to have. It's just, that's conjecture. But it's really interesting. Out of nowhere, a queen and her son convert to Judaism. So anyway, so that's just.
I've also heard when Thomas ended up, I believe, in India, or that area that we now know as India. Also, they had already known about the coming of the Messiah.
I heard the prophecies.
Yeah. So it might be also connected to the news leak that came out about when the wise men came home.
Yeah.
Okay, so you fast forward in the story.
I mean, I'm sure they would share about it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So anyway, so the story continues. So the wise men come there, and then this is odd thing, right? they pack up, they have their caravan, and Jim and I were just having a great time imagining they're traveling, coming through Babylon or Parthia, and coming to the border of Roman border, really, because Rome's conquered, and they're bringing a small entourage, maybe a small little army. Jim thinks there might have been enough soldiers because they have to have protection in a caravan out in the middle of nowhere, right? And so
wealthy men,
yeah, and they would have had protection with them. So this is no small. This is not like three guys in the movies. Three guys that show up with a couple servants and a couple of camels.
Yeah.
This is a major caravan that would have to have been, and it doesn't say 3 wise men, by the way. There could have been 10 sorcerers. It just says they brought 3 gifts.
right?
So it could be any number. So anyway, so they come to Jerusalem, and they're expecting, it's so funny. They're coming to Jerusalem expecting that everyone's going to know where the Messiah has been born. I mean, we got a sign.
We're coming from all the way over here, 1,000 miles away.
Yes.
You guys surely know.
Yeah, so they roll into
You
town.
gotta see this thing.
Yeah, they see the first guy there, and they're probably saying, hey, yo, hey, where's the Messiah been born? We want to come and give him gifts. And the guy goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And I probably turn to Jim and go, what an idiot. He doesn't even know. Huh, that's crazy. He must be new in town too. Hey, you, where's the Messiah be born?
Because if there really was a king born, there would be ceremony, there would
Yeah.
be prestige. I mean, it would be a big event, right?
Yeah, the king, your king is born. It's in Jerusalem, and they're going around asking people, where's the Messiah born? And no one knows.
Well, if you're the Roman guard, though, and you meet this caravan or this train, you're only going to let a select delegation come across the border. And they say, hey, we're coming to see the king that was born of the Jews. So the Romans are going to take them where?
Right to Herod, exactly.
To the temple.
Right. Well, so and that may be the case, or just because of this, again, they're going through town, they're talking to people.
They wouldn't be allowed to.
Well, maybe not. Yeah.
That to me is a part of the kind of fictitiousness of the story, because these are enemies to Rome.
That's true.
And
They wouldn't have free hand to move.
they would not have free hand to move about and talk to people. They went directly, the Romans would take them directly, turn them over to Herod and the temple guard, but they wouldn't leave them because of the danger that could present, because this was the arch enemy of Rome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just can't see them having the freedom to walk about.
Okay. And that may be. And that's why.
It's 8. You want to take a break, or you want to?
Nah, let's keep going. We got to
roll.
roll.
I
Okay.
just want to make sure.
That's just my.
That could be. And that's, you guys are getting a feeling of how fun this is to imagine into this. So then Herod gets wind of it, and it says, and all of Jerusalem heard about this, and all Jerusalem was afraid.
Right.
And there's 2 or 3 reasons why the city would be afraid. Number one is because Herod is the king. They know what he's like, and he gets wind that this is happening. We don't know what Herod's going to do in reprisal to this. If this gets out in the city, then the zealots, the people who are the underground rebellion group, could rise up. If I'm just a normal citizen, this can go bad any which way.
Yeah.
Go sideways.
And what happens when the zealots rise up?
If the Romans come in. Rome comes in, and everyone suffers. So the city is just going, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah, if things are peaceful and tranquil, a new king means trouble for
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the zealots are going, the Messiah, yeah, and then Herod's going to put that down, and the Romans are going to come in and just squash the whole thing. So so Herod brings them into his chambers, so to speak, and just brings them in quietly, and says tries to ascertain from them when the child was born. And so the best guess is probably at the earliest 4 to 5 months earlier. They're arriving 4 to 5, maybe 6 months after the birth of Jesus. So they're going to tell them the night in which they saw the star, which was that night they would discern that. And then Herod, they don't know. Herod doesn't know where, he doesn't. I mean, he certainly knows the prophecy, the Messiah, but he's, it's like, okay, but he never really investigated. I mean, maybe it's a myth, maybe it's something in their history, folklore, whatever. you know, and so then these guys are here. We've seen this.
It's not on his radar. Till
Right, yeah.
Obviously, because he hasn't persecuted him.
Right, and then all of a sudden this caravan of these foreigners from the enemy come there and they're saying, we saw his star in the east, he's born. And Herod's going, what the heck? You know, so he calls in the scribes and you know, and they pour the scriptures and they saw, oh, it's in Bethlehem. So now Herod knows where and when. He's got it, right? And so he sends those guys, saying, well, you go to which is interesting. He doesn't want to make a scene. I think Herod's planning, my opinion, a snatch and grab. You know, the wise men go there. He's figured this out. You guys go there. I want to come after you find out. Come and tell me where he is. He's planning. They're going to go there, do their thing, come back and tell him. They're going to go home, whatever. Then he's going to go down and kill that kid. And it's quiet. It's hushed. It's over. You know, that would be my plan, because you don't want this getting out. You want this whole thing to go away.
Quiet.
Yeah, just go away, you know, which is interesting. It gives you an insight into the hard heart of Herod, because this is a fulfillment of Jewish prophecy. You know what I'm saying? And yet this is a fulfillment that the Messiah, this is of God. And yet Herod, all he thinks about is, no one's going to take my throne. Well, probably if it's a baby, no one's going to take the throne from my son. My family line is going to stay on the throne.
Well, I think that's probably true, but I think it's bigger than that. It's no one's going to take the throne of Edomites, the arch enemy kind of the Jews, who, you know, they're, let's say, cousins at best. It's kind of like if today the United States came in and said, we're going to put the leader of Hamas is going to be the president of Israel.
That's good.
It wouldn't go very well, but Hamas would never let Israel then regain because of the power that they would have over the greater country.
Right.
But they were supported by Rome, like Hamas would be supported by the United States. So there's no way that, even though there was more Jews than Edomites, it was Rome that kept them in power. So it was like kind of in your face, Israel, I'm not giving this up.
Yeah.
And it's for my people.
Okay.
It's bigger.
Okay, good. Okay.
He could care less about a baby that was a Jew.
Right, exactly. And so this threatens everything. So he sends the wise men. It's a good plan. I mean, it's a good plan. He sends the wise men, but then we're back into the story. So they go to Bethlehem. It's not a big town. The town itself is like, I forget, I want to say like a couple hundred people at the most. There isn't a big town. So, but it's interesting. There's been no light. The movies portray that the men saw the light in the east and they followed it to the west. They just saw a star. That's over. They go to Jerusalem. They have to ask. They find out it's Bethlehem. As soon as they leave Jerusalem, this light appears and it leads them right to the house. It's almost like there's a big finger going, Jesus, Jesus. I mean, you know, this house.
Big
you know?
neon.
Yeah, it's like that house.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, and so why? It's simple. The clock is ticking. As soon as Herod knows, they don't know this, but God knows that Herod's going to plan this. And so because 6 miles it's only a maybe 2 hour walk, 2 or 3 hours at the most. They're very close. And so when they leave Jerusalem, they can't be going around trying to figure out which house has the baby in it, because now they've got a 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 month old, you know, and you'd have to go start interrogating people. Well, I got a new baby boy. Well, where did you come from? Or, you know, so there's a lot of stuff, you know, so God has got to get them to the house, you know, to give the gifts. And so the house is pointed out. And that's the last we see of that light. That light takes them and it shines right over the house, which tells us it could not have been a star billion miles away, you know, a bazillion miles, you know.
It probably wasn't night.
Huh?
It probably wasn't night.
It was a night.
It wasn't.
Maybe even it wasn't night. That's what he's saying. I mean, it could somehow.
You didn't travel at night.
They're supernaturally getting direction to the house.
Yeah, there's a light. Well, it clearly says there's a light over the house.
They didn't have headlights on those camels.
Right.
And it was very dangerous to travel
Okay.
at night. And so I mean, you have to assume that that light was very much different than a star to illuminate something
Oh, well, yeah,
in
right.
the daytime.
Okay, yes, absolutely.
Because that's how you're going to travel.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Or early morning, something like that. But, okay, so anyway, so they get to the house, right? Now Jesus, at this point, again, the picture postcards have Jesus in a stable, and the wise men offer gifts. You've got a 6-month-old. Maybe you have someone could be up to a year-old. You could have a toddler. We just don't know.
Right.
They're not in a stable. They're in a house. Joseph has found housing for them. He's probably found work. They're not planning on going anywhere. This, by the way, Bethlehem is both of their ancestral homes, Mary and Joseph. This is their hometown. And so they would be welcome there.
Not again, Matthew's trying to tell you about prophecy.
Exactly. Prophecy is being fulfilled all through this. And we're reading those prophecies. So anyway, so they go to the house and they offer the gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? Gold is a gift given to a king. Frankincense is something you offer to a priest, very expensive. And the myrrh, I thought myrrh is just for embalming, but it turns out it's an analgesic, very expensive, and sometimes it's used as incense as well, but it's used for a lot of things, but it's very expensive stuff, And so they offer these gifts, and it says they bow down. It's kind of funny. It says they bow down and worshiped him, right? Okay. I mean, you could do a great Monty Python routine. Well, if you got a little toddler, they're going to go, no, he's over there.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly, but
Yeah.
but they come into the house and how many of them there are, we don't know, and they offer these gifts.
Jesus had a mini throne.
Yeah.
Well, but it's not. I mean, in one sense, like it's here. We don't have kings. We don't know what that's like. But there, if the emperor is a baby or the king is a baby, you worship him. That's the cultural piece. There's nothing strange about that. There's strange about us because we don't believe anyone is born into that royal heritage. But for them, if that a baby and he's a king, if you're an old man, you get down on your knees.
And that's interesting. Now, look at again. Matthew is pointing out we are learning something different already with God. That here we have educated, wealthy men from another country, Gentiles, coming all the way, bypassing the royal city, the temple, the royal family, whatever, going to a lowly city, to a town with 2 peasants, in a dirty little house, in a room, whatever it is, to a little toddler in diapers, and that's who they're bowing down to worship, as if he was a king in the palace. I mean, what a stark contrast from what history would expect.
You got to move forward again, or you can tell we're not professionals and that we haven't staged this because our teacher keeps rolling out of the picture. So
And so anyway, it's just a stark contrast. So, so they offer their gifts. We don't know we don't know how long they stay. We do know it can't be for very long because now we got Herod, expecting these guys to come back. So at some point, maybe a day, we don't know. We disagree. It could be 2 days, 3 days. Could be more. I mean, they're only 6 miles away. It doesn't take long to go do your thing and come back and tell me, because I'm expecting you to come back and tell me.
Right.
But anyway, so these guys give the gifts and then they're warned in a dream. So maybe that night, it could be literally that night. We don't know. But they're warned in a dream, don't go back to Herod. Why? Why not go back to Herod? Why not go back to Herod? Anyone got an idea? Don't go back to Herod and go,
Well, I think somehow that it's like, it does this. I mean, I would just say if you've never watched the movie The Nativity Story, there's some wonderful imagery in that, and it's like they have had dinner with Herod and spent time with him, but they're wise men and they're getting wise and they kind of come to it on their own. It of course, it's sort of like, maybe that guy Herod doesn't have such great intentions, and I don't know about a king wants to go worship another king. Like it's kind of like they probably gauge him to be insincere somehow, and it's sort of like I think that they just, however it is, that's how it comes to us. But they wise up and they realize like this is not a good deal. Like there's something different about this guy. They have to have. I mean, they're bringing. Somehow they're figuring things out because they bring gifts for a king and gifts for a priest and gifts for a dead man.
Right.
So they are certainly gathering that this little baby they're seeing is not the typical emperor, not the typical king, something, and that I would just imagine that they're just wising up and saying,
But the text says
yeah,
God warned them in a dream.
Yeah, God warns him in a
So-
dream.
yeah, and so then they're getting out of that warning. Sorry, Herod's bad news.
And
Because
remember who these guys also are,
Enemy,
but they're considered to be sorcerers.
right.
So dreams, visions, things like that meant a lot to them
Everything to
still,
them,
yeah.
you know, so.
And so there's a good chance, again, if I was Herod and I was suspicious that these guys, if they go back, I mean, there's a chance that Herod could have killed them. And then you just make it all go away, you know? You just make it all go
Yeah,
away.
their lives were in danger.
They could have been, exactly, they could have been. So they leave, right? And so now Herod realizes he's been tricked. The question is, if he knows he's been tricked, that means he would probably think, this is where it gets muddled for me, and we don't have a lot of time to spend on this. This is where you can go on rabbit trails and we can spend the whole night playing with this one. But if he knows he's been tricked, that means Mary and Joseph would know something's up. The wise men would have said, hey, you know, because they wouldn't have just said, well, let's don't tell Mary and Joseph we had this dream or so, you know what I mean? So
Well, they could have gotten warned on the way back to see Herod. I mean, you don't know if they told that to Mary and
could be,
Joseph, too,
yeah,
so.
yeah. So but anyway, so Herod knows he's been tricked. So the question is, if it goes,
But
go ahead.
I just would say this. It's not all happening in the same day, because
Oh yeah, this is good.
when do you dream?
At night,
So you go, we don't know how long they were with Mary and Joseph. It could have been several days. In their culture, you don't just go, pop in and leave. There might have been festivities involved with presenting such incredible gifts.
Yeah.
So they are very used to setting up a camp, tents, everything. This is not, again, suppose it's not just 3 wise men, but it's many more. And so we know that at least one day goes by because they're sleeping
right?
to have a dream. And let's say that the next morning they got up. So there's time going on here. And even if they leave right then and word goes back to Herod that they're moving out, Herod's believing that they're coming at least 6 hours back to Jerusalem. So in that 6-hour period, you know, they're able to leave again. Probably at some point they're accompanied by Romans to get back to the border, you know, of the trade route in which they're traveling. So
Right. And you brought up earlier,
time is going by.
right? And also Jim brought up a good point, is that when Herod feels that he's been tricked, I mean, the text just says he got tricked, and so he sends people to go and kill the kids. But it may have been the case, you might send someone to go out and check it. Hey, these guys have been gone a long time. You know, you don't just
Well, yeah, there's no internet.
Exactly.
Right.
There's no, you know, and we read this in 2 pages.
right,
But it didn't happen 2 pages.
Right.
Everything happened at a speed that it's hard to fathom in our world of instantaneous
Right.
communication.
right. And so he may have sent someone to go down. He comes back and says, they're gone. The wise men are gone. Okay, so now he's got a dilemma. What do I do? You know, and then, so again, time is passing by, whatever it is.
Create
And
a
then
plan.
Jim brought up a point. I have always assumed it was Roman soldiers. All the movies have Roman soldiers going to kill the children, you know. So Herod is very practical. Okay, I don't know which one it is. I know it's a baby. He could be 2 months old. He could be a year. So just go kill all the boys in
Right.
the area, 2 years
Just
and
to
under.
be safe.
Yeah, and the point is, when soldiers go there, whoever they are, they're not doing ID checks and they're not doing diaper checks. You know, they're just going in the room and
They just look.
looks like a baby boy,
Yeah.
kill him. I mean, this is brutal. This is brutal.
It could be probably temple guard.
And he thinks it's the temple guards. That just blew me away.
Herod didn't have any authority over Roman.
Yeah, only under an uprising would the soldier be released to Herod. That's a good point. It's only because he had access to it, but only something that would benefit Rome. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I never even thought of that. That was probably the temple guard that would go there and kill all the children. And it's likely that maybe some would have tried to hide their kids. You know, I mean, this is not a. People are, when you start hearing people cry, you don't sit in your own house and go, oh, I wonder what's going on, look, Big
You
Jim.
don't just sit down and take it. You're going to try to hide your
You're going to hide your
protect
kids, you're going to run, you're going to do anything you can.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is not a picture postcard for Christmas. If you want a picture postcard for Christmas, you're going to have a picture of babies being slaughtered in the background of your picture, you know. And I don't want to send that postcard to my grandma.
It's not a children's story.
Yeah, it's not a children's, this is horrible, you know. So Herod wipes out all those children. it's interesting that the angel also is in a dream and tells Mary and Joseph, go to Egypt. Because if Herod had suspected that they had escaped, which way are they going to go? They're going to go with the Magi, to the caravan. That's the safest place to be. So even if he suspected that, he never would suspect that couple would go the opposite direction. And he sends them to Egypt. There's a big colony of Jews, a Jewish population in Egypt. They can go there and they can blend in. They got the gold. They got the, they're going to be okay. Okay. So is there anything else you want to add on that? It's just, this is not this blows the picture postcard out of the water. And again, notice the God of peace. God comes into our history. It is his light. It's God is the one orchestrating this. And it's almost like Matthew is saying, or God is revealing, look how the world responds to its king, to the Messiah. It's a baby, but it's a threat.
Yeah.
He's a king who's a threat to another king. And look how the world rises up and tries to destroy him, even in his birth. I mean, that's just, it's like, you're going to kill all these innocent children because this a baby, it's almost like you can imagine if Herod had sent men there and they find out that couple's gone, sir. The neighbors said that there was a couple and they left. So is Herod? It's been maybe 2 or 3 days. He's going to send a troop of soldiers go across an international border to attack a caravan of his enemies to kill a baby. Rome hears about this and they say, "What did you do?" I mean, think about how silly this sounds. You started an international incident with one of our enemies to kill a baby. You're not. You're going to be recalled. You're going to die, Herod. I mean, that's how absurd that sounds. Yeah. And yet, that's what he did. He really went to kill a baby. And so anyway, so then Mary and Joseph. Now the story continues. And why don't you finish? Did we read that? Oh yeah. Why don't you finish off the chapter there, verse 19.
So, but when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus reigned over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene.
Okay, so they flee to Egypt, and they live there. Now they lived there for a few years. So Jesus is no longer a baby when finally another dream comes to Joseph and says, "Rise, Herod is dead." Yeah. And so I forget actually you can actually find out how old Jesus is in one sense, because you can find out they have the date of Herod's death, and I don't know what that is right now. And when Archelaus takes over, but Jesus is now a young boy. Okay, and so they're heading back. And they're warned in a dream, or to go back, but then as they get closer, then the dream says, "Don't go back to Bethlehem, go to Galilee." Well, there's a good reason why you don't go to Bethlehem, because I don't know about you, but if someone came into town and killed my little baby boy, this is still going to be fresh in my mind a few years later. And all of a sudden, you get this couple who live with you for maybe a year, coming back into town with their boy.
Escaped.
They escaped that night. You don't think that would get back to Archelaus? People are going to say, "How did you, well, God warned us in a dream." I mean, you can imagine the vitriol, the anger, they would be exposed. They would be exposed that this is the couple that escaped that night. It's almost like
they may be and people may have known that they were the reason for the slaughter. Anyway, I mean, you don't know that, but it certainly could come out.
Yeah, why?
That it's like, why? You're the reason that all our kids got killed and you escaped. Exactly.
Because people will be crying, "What? Why? We're coming to, exactly." And so he doesn't go to Bethlehem. He's basically going into protective custody in one sense. Go up to Galilee. That's 70 miles.
Whoa.
Way up there, and so they go to Galilee, and then they end up going back to their their town they were living in, Nazareth, where they actually started this whole thing.
But if you're in any, let's say, third world country, if I'm in Accra, Ghana,
Okay.
Let's say that I get on the radar somehow, committed a crime or something. Where are you going to go and hide? Anywhere in any country, you're going to go to the slums.
Right.
It's going to be the hardest to find you in that kind of atmosphere, and you're not going to be known. You're not going to be recognized. And I think Nazareth is the perfect environment for that.
Yeah, and Mary and Joseph have been gone for years. You know, they've left to Jerusalem at least a year there, and then they go to Egypt. So they're coming back maybe 5, 6, 7 years, you know, much later, and they're coming back with a boy, you know. So and so they move back into they regain new life in Nazareth, you know, and that's why Jesus is. People say, oh, he's from Nazareth, you know, and no one really pays attention that he was actually born in Bethlehem. That's why later on in the Gospels, remember, I think it's in John, when Jesus is, people say, well, the man has been, the lame man who's been healed, and he's brought to the leaders, and they say, you know, who healed you? You know, well, Jesus, he must be the Messiah or something like that. And they say, he can't be the Messiah because the Messiah is born in Bethlehem, and this guy hails from Nazareth. They just didn't know, you know. So there was one more thing I was going to share. It's interesting that it says he shall be called a Nazarene. That's not in the Old Testament. That phrase, it's the only thing that refers to that type of thing is, and this is where Jim may agree or not agree, but he's coming from a place that he's despised and rejected. It's not just him, but it's the place. Being called a Nazarene was an insult.
It was a derogatory.
It's a derogatory because Nazareth was a despised area for two reasons. Nazareth was a small Jewish type community up in Galilee, which is about 20 miles east of Capernaum. Capernaum is a Jewish town, but it's cosmopolitan. It's a lot of Hellenistic influence, a lot of Greek Gentile influence, and the Jewish town of Nazareth would have been kind of a Orthodox, what do you call that? Would have been, you know.
So it's different than the specific prophecy about Bethlehem.
Right.
Because that is specifically, but this is more of like alluding to the fact that, you know, he was a nobody.
Yeah, to be called a Nazarene was an insult.
And rejected.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. And then Bethlehem and then the Judea or Jerusalem would have viewed anyone from Nazareth as being, well, you're not from here. Remember, if you're not from Jerusalem, you're second class no matter what. You're a Jew, but you know. So anyway, and it was just a small town. It'd be like Torrance. Are you on here? Torrance is there. Yeah. It'd be like Torrance would try to say something and say, the guy was born in South Central, man. Yeah. You know, don't pay attention to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes with the territory. You know, he's born in South, whatever. You know, you just write him off. And that's how Jesus was responded to. He's from Nazareth. In fact, like they said, to be called a Nazarene was an insult. To be called a Nazarene was an insult. So.
Yeah, and then don't they say something like, "What good could come of Nazareth?"
Yeah.
You know, they're like, nothing good can come out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, and they say as much in terms of how they respond to him when he gets going. You know, later they're like, "Hey, nothing good can come out of that backwoods town or something."
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Well, we're basically done. But Jim, that thing about Philip. Okay, so that kind of concludes the study about the birth. This is a real live account. It's historically accurate. We have the names and places of the people of real times, real places. And again, the thing I would point out is look at the difference of how the world is expecting the Messiah, how God enters the history, and the reaction to the violence of rejection, destroy. This is a threat. This baby is a threat to the powers that be, you know, and how God is using what is. Again, if had the Jews not invaded the Edomites or Idumea, then you wouldn't have had a Herod on the throne. You would have had your own, successor high priest, and you may have never had to slaughter the children. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff you could guess, but yet God is it's almost like I said, Matthew is putting this in there to show us, number one, the fulfillment of the scriptures, that Jesus is fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies. To the Jews, this is greatly encouraging. To people who are in the 60 AD, who are suffering, persecution is on the horizon, And the church, the Jewish Christians, the churches are going, I don't know. And then here comes this letter saying from Matthew, who was with Jesus, saying, no, he is the Messiah.
Well,
Look.
I think you have to see that he's writing to primarily unbelieving Jews. It's an evangelistic letter. And the only way that a Jew is going to believe that Jesus was actually the Messiah is to be able to demonstrate and prove that these prophecies were fulfilled. So we may read it like, oh, that's an encouraging letter saying, yeah, he is the Messiah, you're right. Versus, no, I mean, Matthew did his homework, made sure that every one of these things were covered that had to be fulfilled in order for this to actually be the Messiah. So I think it's more of an evangelistic letter than it is like a encouragement letter.
Yeah. And again, how God enters our history. He enters vulnerable, weak, and he stays vulnerable and weak and as a servant. Well, we know that. And his ministry begins. And so as soon as his ministry begins, the same things start applying. There's
it's a foreshadowing of the rest of his life.
Exactly. That's exactly what putting it. Well, in there. It's a foreshadowing of everything else. Yeah.
And it's a very human story. It's not the type of story you would make up. I mean, if you think about, if you were going to just fairy tale a God in and make up something, you would want to make him impressive and wonderful and born in the right places and have the right pedigree and be this great and grand thing, like walk into life instead of come in this way.
That's the cool
make
thing, though, is because he did have the pedigree.
Yeah.
See, people looked at Mary and Joseph and they said, who in the world? No, these are peasants.
Right.
But that's why Matthew does the best job of all the authors in demonstrating the genealogy of Jesus, is that's what he was trying to demonstrate and prove to the Jews, that this is legitimate. He is the king.
Yeah, and that even this guy that you don't expect, he came from the right places. That he, like you said, Matthew was saying, now wait a second, you expected this guy to look different when you actually got him, but if you look at him, he has the right credentials.
Right.
Yeah.
He has the right credentials, he just looks different than you expected, and so it's really an apologetic letter, in that sense too.
Right.
And,
that's really right. Exactly.
Yeah, it is an apologetic letter and not one that anybody would have, could have possibly imagined or made up.
Yeah, exactly. Never saw it coming. Never saw this coming. So.
Yeah, so.
This letter is still applicable to Israel today. I mean, really, it's still revealing their prophecies.
And people are still looking at it.
So that, I think we're going to be done. It's about 8:30, and that's it. So,
Nathaniel,
go ahead. What?
you were going to say something about Philip, but
Oh, yeah. Okay.
you don't have to.
No. Okay. So Jim has got this wild idea. I think he's out of his mind. All right? I'm looking at everyone. No, I'm just kidding. But this is really cool. So go ahead. I mean,
I want to see how you do.
Okay. Okay. So if you go fast forward to the beginning of John, the Gospel of John, all right, where Jesus is encountering Andrew and Peter, and he sees Philip, and Philip goes and gets his brother Nathaniel. He says, "Look, I found the Messiah. I found the Messiah," because John has told him that. So he gets Nathaniel. Nathaniel comes, and Jesus says, "Behold, a man of no guile, or a man without guile. What you see is what you get." And then Jesus says to Nathaniel, he says, "Before I saw you under the fig tree, or before, what is it? Come on. Okay. Now, come on.
I saw you under the fig tree."
Yeah. Before you were, there's something, and he says, "I saw you under the fig tree. Before you came here," something like that.
What chapter is it?
It's chapter 1, I think.
Well, yeah, he was studying.
Yeah,
I don't know where you guys are heading with us. So.
Yeah, this is.
He says, "I saw you under the fig tree."
I don't know why he's bringing this up.
Because
Philip went to look for Nathaniel. This is verse 45, chapter 1.
this may play directly into the slaughter of the children.
Yes.
Okay.
We have found the very person Moses and prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. "Nazareth," exclaimed Nathanael. "Can anything good come from Nazareth?"
Yeah.
"Come and see for yourself," Philip replied. As they approached, Jesus said, "Now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity. How do you know about me? Nathanael asked. And Jesus replied,
Yeah.
I could see you under the fig tree before Philip found you. Then Nathanael exclaimed, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. So his response is like over the top. He exclaimed, Rabbi, which is teacher, you are the Son of God. You are the Son of God, the King of Israel. So do you believe just because I told you I'd seen you under the fig tree? So the teaching of the early church in the Didache is
Now, what is explain Didache?
it's one of the early
It's like a commentary in the scriptures.
right
People
of
who memorize from
the
the
early
Christians.
church.
Yeah.
Maybe like I think the 2nd century, right at the beginning of the 2nd century, that was kind of one of their primary texts that they will pass around. And in that, the tradition and the oral history that got put into the Didache was that Nathanael was probably one of the children of that time when Herod slaughtered, and he was hid, which, like Moses, was hid by his mother, who may or may not have been Jewish. Or there are some thoughts that maybe he might have been an illegitimate child that was put under a tree, because that was a very common practice during that day. If you couldn't care for a child, or you
left them out.
illegitimate, or also half, if they were half Jew and half
Right.
Gentile,
Yeah.
the Jews, that was a big no-no, so they'd put them under a tree. So when people would walk by that path, they'd hear a baby crying, and if they were able, they would adopt that child into their family. And if they were not Jew, they would oftentimes change their name to a Jewish name, so the child would not be shamed and be able to integrate into the culture. So when it says, when Philip found you, would be a very hidden secret thing within that family that only that family would know, because little Philip, as he's coming down the trail, finds this baby and brings his mom or whatever, and they bring him in. They change his name to a Jewish name, or it's known about him his whole life that he might be an illegitimate child, or that he might be one of the hidden children. And so
When they come to slaughter.
right, when it comes to slaughter. So when Jesus reveals that I've known you since you were hidden under the tree, when Philip found you, would be that thing that makes him go, what in the world? Only the Son of God, only God could know that.
Right, because you were a baby at that time, you wouldn't know either.
Right.
Right.
And it's secret.
It's secret
Yeah.
for his safety.
Yeah,
So
so it could
and
be
so
something that
Didache-
goes back to the.
And the Didache suggested that he might have been one of the children.
Well, no, that is their tradition.
That is their tradition.
That is their
Right,
tradition.
right.
The early church's tradition was that.
Yeah.
Say it. What?
That he was one of the children that were
That
hidden.
was his
From the slaughter.
Right.
from the
Yeah.
slaughter, that he escaped somehow along with Jesus. He's one of the few
And
that
then when he was converted, this is where they think something might have been said about his genealogy, that he might have been part Gentile, because when he becomes a follower of Christ, he changes his name back to a Gentile name, which is a very interesting thing, because normally they would change their name into a Jewish name.
Right.
Even when Gentiles were saved, they would take on a Jewish name.
name
But
change.
he
Okay.
took a Gentile name, which is something that's just kind of one of those fun things to think about, because now the Gentiles, he was proud of.
Yeah,
you know.
interesting.
Anyway, just a little rabbit trail, but it's just interesting, because that is the early, and that's in one of the first century, the tradition of the church, the early
Yeah.
church, which means it's already been orally accepted, and that's why it's put into the teaching. So
Yeah.
we just leave it alone. Just something to think about. It's fun. That's one of the things that's fun. But anyway, so we're done. We're done.
So you get a little kind of a window into what a night would be like, as the guys are hanging out, or we're just spending time together and studying the scriptures. And this is our last Thursday night of the year. We'll get going after New Year's. So we'll have a couple weeks off. If you're in town, come and join us on Sunday morning for coffee and donuts. I know most of us will be here. I don't think a beef is not quite going to make it all the way from Mexico. We'll miss him. But those of you that are around, come and see us. Hopefully we'll see Amelia and Mia on Sunday and then take a little Christmas break. So Miriam, please let Sandra know that, she's been in our prayers, and if you guys, if she needs anything, let us know. And of course, as everybody, we hope you continue to journey with us and study. If you have any more questions, if you want to do a personal Bible study, Scott does one, I do one, we can come and talk, we can answer questions, and
have Bible, we'll travel.
right, get to know Jesus better together. So thanks everybody for being here, and invite your friends, and we'll get ready to rock and roll, I guess, after the new year. So, all right, good night, everybody. Thank you very much. Take it easy. See you around. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.